going to give you an overview of some options of careers you can do in the insurance sector. So just quickly before that, a little bit about me. So I did my A-levels in chemistry, physics, maths, and further maths. And my initial plan was to go to UCL to study medical physics, but my A-levels didn't go very well. I didn't get my target grades, and I went to my backup choice, which was UEA, to do natural sciences, to do maths and physics. So if you've got any questions about what happens if anything doesn't go to plan, you can ask me later. But it turns out this actually worked out really well for me. During this degree, I did modules in weather, climate, and low carbon technologies, and my dissertation was on earthquake modelling, and I got really into this stuff all around kind of natural hazards. And I really liked being in academia, so I stayed on to do a PhD at the University of Reading. And what I do now is I still work at universities. So I've worked at the University of Reading, University of Bristol, and I've just moved to Newcastle University. And all my work is around modelling impacts of extreme weather, either for the insurance sector or in electricity systems. So the reason I've been asked to talk to you today is because for the last year, I've been doing this science engagement fellowship with the insurance sector. And this has given me the chance to work with lots of really interesting people. So some insurance companies, people like the Bank of England, who are a regulator that makes sure all of the banks, insurers and financial institutions are behaving themselves and making sure they've got enough money to remain solvent. But also some companies like flood modelers or climate services. So there's questions about internships earlier. A lot of these companies all do internship schemes. So take a picture of this slide, get in touch with them on LinkedIn. There's some really good options here if what I say turns out to be interesting to you. So I'm going to talk about two particular careers, one which is more of a physical sciences career, and one which maybe if you're not so keen on doing something which is this really physical science background, you know, like maths and physics, but you're still interested in doing something related to weather and climate. So the key thing about the insurance sector is a lot of jobs are all related to natural hazards, and particularly those that might cause damage. So we've got some examples on here: tornadoes, wildfires, extreme cold, hurricanes, heat waves, which we're all quite familiar of after last week, and extreme rainfall. So the key thing about these hazards, and many more you could think of, Ravi mentioned a different set this morning, they all cause damage. So some of this damage might be comical, like your trampoline might not be in your garden after a windstorm has passed, but a lot of the time it can be really serious. So we've got some pictures here from the Turkish earthquake at the top, and some huge flooding that happened in Germany that led to landslides in 2021. So when you think of insurance, you probably either think of the Silly Go Compare Man or maybe these guys. And when you go on a price comparison website and you get all these costs, or your parents do, it's not the stupid meerkats, right, that are setting the costs for how much home insurance or car insurance is. For home insurance, there are special tools called catastrophe models that are used to set these prices. And a really good career for someone who's interested in weather and climate is to be a catastrophe modeler. So I'm just going to quickly talk you through how these models work, and meteorology comes in many steps of the process. So if you wanted to build a catastrophe model for European windstorms, let's say, that most of us probably live in the UK, the first thing you'd need to know is information about lots of historical storms or simulations of potential storms that could pass over the UK. So this is an example of some storm tracks over the last few years going over the UK. You can then use this kind of set of events to think about hazards. So it's not the storm track that causes the damage, it's the extreme winds that are associated with it, right? So here we've got a map as from wind speeds. So the more orange it is, the stronger the wind speeds are. And this was a storm that passed right over the middle of the UK in 2007. So we can then, using a catastrophe model for loads and loads of storms, think about somewhere where you live. think about wind speeds you might experience and how that might relate to loss and damage. So there's a graph here at the bottom which is showing the relationship between wind speeds and property damage. So it's not linear, and it only kicks in at very, very high wind speeds. But you can use relationships like this in a catastrophe model to think about, depending where you are, where you live, how exposed you might be to these risks. And loads of people with meteorological backgrounds or interest in natural hazards sit in insurance companies making these kind of models for both the present, and now there's a growing interest in thinking about it in a future climate. So what kind of things might you need if you want to do this career? So an undergraduate degree, you need to go to university. Either there's many routes that companies aren't too fussy, to be honest. You can either have done physical geography or earth sciences. You could do general geography if you wanted, just as long as you've done quite a few of those physical modules about the hazards. Or you could come at it from a maths or statistics perspective. So then you might know a bit more about the modelling and maybe a bit less about the hazards. But something you will definitely be trained in when you join the company, if not before, is computing. So within these companies, lots of analysis is done either in computing languages like Python or in Excel. So some computational competence is needed, and just enjoying working with data is a really big thing. Also being very curious about weather or geology. So there's also these models for things like earthquakes that I mentioned, or volcanic eruptions, and they span the whole world. So maybe if you're interested in weather and climate over developing countries, or just anywhere, this is quite a fun career and a way to learn about that. So once you've got your degree, you apply for a graduate scheme to get into these jobs. Or if you don't, or you could do a PhD like I have done, and many other people who'll be talking today. And then you can go into these companies at a higher level. The general rule is the more education you have, the more you've kind of proven your ability to learn. So they think you'll just be able to spin up a little bit quicker. So that's the catastrophe modelling. The other side of the things I'd like to talk about is net zero plans for businesses. So we all know that we're trying to reduce our carbon emissions, and Matt will talk about this a bit more in the next talk. But if we want to get to net zero, it's a big effort by everybody, right? And one of the big people that are having to make an effort are people in the finance sector. So they do a lot of investing, and they spend a lot of money maybe on things that aren't so ethical or sustainable. So there's this whole growing area where there's loads and loads of recruitment in at the moment, all around environmental, social and governance, so ESG. So all large firms, whether you're a bank or whether you're Primark, you have targets for your ESG. And so from the environmental perspective, you need to think about your carbon footprint, about sustainable practices and sustainable investments. It's not good for these large banks to be investing in coal and fossil fuels anymore. The social and governance perspectives are thinking about within your company, how do you treat your employees? Is everything equal and diverse? And also the pay structures in the companies, are they well organized? So every company gets this kind of ESG score. And there's lots of websites now that you can go look at, so you can see like how ethical is your bank. So this is quite new, and this is quite forward thinking. So there's a lot of opportunities now for young people such as yourselves to get into this area. And maybe you could come into this with a degree in geography, maybe economics or international development. You just need to be good at problem solving, really passionate about sustainability and climate change, and really good with people, because you'll probably be working with people who've really got to change their traditional view of how the company works. Then maybe you could apply for a graduate scheme in a company. I think you could probably do these jobs without a degree if university is something you might not want to do yet. So just some key advice for me. I think make sure if you do go to university, you study something you enjoy. Don't worry if you don't know exactly what you want to do today. I definitely didn't when I went to university. And if you make the wrong decision, it's really not the end of the world. The careers are long, you'll have lots of time to change.